In 1995, a 31-year-old programmer made his first million from a startup acquisition. He celebrated by going to McDonald's, ordering a Big Mac, and then going home to his one-bedroom apartment. His name was Jeff Bezos. That same year, a lottery winner named William Post won $16.2 million. He bought a mansion, a fleet of cars, handed out money to anyone who asked, and invested in his brother-in-law's business ideas. Within 1 year, Post was $1 million in debt. Within 12 years, he was collecting food stamps. Two men, similar windfalls, but only one understood what money actually is when you first touch it. There's a specific silence that happens the first time you see a comma and 6 zeros in your bank account. It's not the silence of peace, it's the silence of vertigo. Because for years, maybe decades, you've been playing defense with money, dodging overdraft fees, calculating whether you can afford the nice bottle of wine, watching your account balance like it's your pulse. And then suddenly, the game changes. The number is big enough that it doesn't feel real anymore. And in that unreality, something breaks. People start appearing in your life. Investment advisors you've never met, friends with opportunities, family members with emergencies that somehow cost exactly $40,000. Your own brain starts whispering too. You've earned this, you deserve to enjoy it, life is short, what's the point of having money if you live like you're still broke? This is the moment. Not the moment you made the million, the moment after, when the million is just sitting there, silent and vulnerable, and you have to decide what it means. And here's what most people don't know. The wealthy have already made that decision before the money ever arrives. They've decided what the million is before they ever hold it. And what they've decided is this: it's not money, it's a seed. And seeds don't get eaten. If you want to understand how real wealth thinks, not how it performs, hit subscribe right now. Let me tell you what the wealthy know that everyone else learns too late. There are two types of money in this world, and your brain treats them completely differently. There's money you earned, the kind that came from your labor, your time, your sacrifice. Your brain guards that money. It feels heavy, real, like it cost you something to get it. Then there's money that appeared. Inheritances, windfalls, bonuses, investment wins, startup exits. This money feels lighter, almost fictional, like you got away with something. And here's the trap. When money appears suddenly, even if you worked years for it, your brain codes it as temporary, as luck, as monopoly cash. And monopoly cash gets spent like monopoly cash, fast, emotionally, and without the kind of fear that protects wealth. The wealthy have learned to override this instinct. They've trained themselves to treat the first million not as an arrival, but as a beginning. Not as freedom, but as responsibility. Because they understand something that changes everything. The first million is the only money you'll ever have that can be destroyed by a single mistake. It's not big enough to absorb stupidity. It's not diversified enough to survive bad luck. It's fragile, mortal, and it demands to be protected with the level of paranoia that looks insane to everyone around you. This is why rich people don't gamble with their first million. Not because they're more disciplined, not because they're smarter, but because they see that million as the foundation stone of a cathedral that doesn't exist yet. You don't use the foundation stone to decorate. You don't sell it for quick cash. You place it carefully and you build on top of it so slowly that people think you're wasting time. But you're not wasting time. You're building something that will outlive you. Here's the split. The exact place where paths diverge and futures get written. When someone who's been broke finally makes their first million, their entire nervous system floods with one emotion: relief. Years of tension finally release. The voice that's been screaming in their head since they were 20, what if I can't make rent? What if I lose my job? What if I end up like my parents? Goes quiet. And in that quiet, they make the most expensive mistake of their life. They relax. They start thinking, I can finally breathe. I can finally live. I can finally stop being so careful. The wealthy do the opposite. When they make their first million, the tension increases because they're not thinking about what the money can buy. They're thinking about what it can become. And what it can become depends entirely on what they don't do with it in the next 12 months. Let me show you how this plays out in real behavior. An ordinary person makes $1 million and immediately starts calculating lifestyle. They think, this could cover 5 years of living expenses, or I could use it to upgrade everything and still have half left. The money becomes a buffer against fear, a permission slip to finally enjoy life. A wealthy person makes $1 million and immediately starts calculating time. They think, if I deploy this correctly, how fast can I turn this into 3 million, 5 million? What's the most boring, reliable way to make this money work for me while I sleep? The ordinary person sees the million as theirs, something they earned and now own. The wealthy person sees it as borrowed, like they're a steward, not an owner, like the money is just passing through their hands on its way to becoming something bigger, and their job is to not mess it up. This mindset shift creates completely different behavior. The wealthy immediately lock 60 to 70% into what they call the fortress. Investments so stable, so boring, that nothing short of societal collapse can touch them. We're talking treasury bonds, dividend aristocrat stocks that have paid out for 50+ years, real estate in markets that never crash. The goal isn't growth, it's permanence. This money exists to generate just enough passive income to cover survival. Not comfort, not luxury, survival. Rent, food, healthcare, basic utilities. Why? Because once your baseline is covered, your brain unlocks. You stop making decisions from fear. You stop taking bad deals because you're desperate. You stop selling assets too early because you're scared. You gain the scarcest resource in wealth building: patience. The ability to wait, to let opportunities come to you instead of chasing them. The next 20 to 30% goes into the engine, whatever made that first million in the first place. If it was a business, they pour it back into that business. If it was a skill, they build infrastructure around that skill. They don't diversify. They don't spread thin. They double down on the one thing they understand better than anyone else. Because wealth doesn't come from knowing a little about everything. It comes from knowing everything about one thing. Only the final 10%, maybe, goes into high-risk, high-reward plays, the moonshots, the angel investments, the stuff that could 10x or go to zero. And this is the only money they're emotionally prepared to lose. It's quarantined. If it disappears, it doesn't change their life. But if it hits, that's how ordinary wealth becomes generational wealth. The ordinary person does this backward. They take 60 to 80% and dump it into exciting opportunities. Crypto, a friend's startup, options trading, a business idea they barely understand. They keep maybe 20% in safe investments as a backup plan, and they tell themselves they're being smart, they're being aggressive, they're thinking big. But they're not thinking, they're feeling. They're scratching an itch. The itch to finally be seen as successful, to prove they deserve the money, to make up for lost time. And that itch costs everything. Let me tell you about a man named Sam Walton. You know him as the founder of Walmart. But before he was worth billions, there was a moment that defined everything. In 1950, Sam was 32 years old. He'd been running a small variety store in Newport, Arkansas, doing well, making about $4,000 a year in profit, which was good money then. Over 5 years, he had saved up about $25,000. Not a fortune, but more money than most people in his town would see in a decade. His wife Helen wanted him to take it easy, maybe buy a nicer house, take a real vacation. They had young kids, they deserved comfort. But Sam had a different idea.
He'd been studying a new retail concept, self-service stores with lower prices and higher volume. He was obsessed with it. So he made a decision that made Helen furious and his friends think he'd lost his mind. He took his entire $25,000 and bought a failing Ben Franklin franchise store in Bentonville, Arkansas, a town of 3,000 people in the middle of nowhere. Here's the thing, Sam didn't buy that store to get rich quick. He bought it because he saw something no one else saw. He understood five and dime retail at a molecular level. He knew what people bought, when they bought it, how much they'd pay, what made them come back. This wasn't a gamble. It was the one game he knew he could win. But even after buying the store, Sam did something that looked insane. He didn't
keep any cash reserves. He didn't diversify. He took every single dollar of profit from that store and poured it back in. New inventory, better displays, longer hours, lower prices. He paid himself almost nothing, lived in a tiny house, drove a beat-up truck. His kids wore hand-me-downs. People in town whispered that Sam Walton was either brilliant or broke, and they weren't sure which. For 5 years, it looked like madness. The store grew, but slowly. Sam worked 80-hour weeks. Helen managed the books. They barely scraped by. And then, in 1962, something clicked. Sam had learned everything there was to know about small-town retail. He'd built systems, trained staff, perfected inventory management, and he was ready to expand. He opened the first Walmart in Rogers, Arkansas, used every dollar he had and borrowed the rest. Then he did it again and again. Each new store was funded by the profits of the last one. No outside investors, no venture capital, no get-rich-quick shortcuts. Just compound growth, boring, relentless, invisible to everyone except Sam. By 1970, Walmart had 18 stores and went public. Sam's stake was worth $15 million. By 1985, he was the richest man in America. But here's what haunts me about this story. In 1950, when Sam had that $25,000, there were dozens of other people in Arkansas with similar amounts of money. And they all spent it. New cars, bigger houses, comfortable retirements, safe, sensible decisions that made perfect sense to everyone around them. And today, their great-grandchildren are working regular jobs, living paycheck to paycheck, with no idea their great-grandfather once had enough money to change everything. Because he spent the seed instead of planting it. Sam Walton planted the seed, and it became a forest. If this story is rewiring how you see money, subscribe before you forget and lose this thread. So what was Sam actually doing? What's the code hidden in this story? First, Sam never saw that $25,000 as his money. He saw it as ammunition, as a tool with a job to do. And the job wasn't to make him comfortable. It was to buy him access to a gain he knew he could win. That store in Bentonville wasn't an investment. It was a beachhead, a position, a place where his knowledge had unfair advantage. This is the first principle of the wealth code. The first million buys you positioning, not pleasure. Most people use their first serious money to upgrade their life. Better apartment, better car, better everything. And there's nothing morally wrong with that. But every dollar you spend on lifestyle is a dollar that's not working. It's dead. It's gone. And when you're building wealth, dead money is expensive because it has an opportunity cost that compounds against you forever. Sam spent zero on lifestyle and everything on positioning. He bought the store. Then he used the profits to buy knowledge, testing what worked, what didn't, what customers actually wanted versus what he thought they wanted. Every dollar was a question he was asking the market, and the market was answering. The second principle, the first million must stay inside your circle of mastery. Sam didn't take his $25,000 and invest in oil drilling or real estate or someone else's restaurant. He put it into the one thing he understood better than almost anyone, five and dime retail. He'd worked in variety stores since he was a kid. He knew the suppliers, knew the margins, knew which products moved and which sat on shelves. He had informational advantage. And informational advantage is the only real edge in investing. When you put your first million into something you don't deeply understand, you're not investing. You're outsourcing. You're trusting. You're hoping. And hope is not a wealth-building strategy. The wealthy only invest where they can see things other people miss, where their knowledge gives them an unfair advantage. Everywhere else, they stay out. The third principle: the first million requires total commitment, not diversification. This is the one that scares people, because we've been taught that diversification is safety. And it is when you're protecting existing wealth. But when you're building wealth, diversification is dilution. You're taking your one advantage and spreading it so thin that it becomes average, mediocre, safe. Sam didn't diversify. He went all in. One store, one concept, one town. And because he wasn't spread across 10 different ideas, he could focus absolutely. He could iterate faster, learn faster, adjust faster. He wasn't managing a portfolio. He was mastering a craft. This is what separates self-made millionaires from people who had money and lost it. Self-made millionaires build. People who lose money, diversify too early, chase too many opportunities, spread themselves thin, and end up mediocre at everything. The fourth principle: the first million must generate cash flow before it does anything else. Sam's store wasn't a growth stock. It wasn't an asset that might appreciate. It was a machine. Every week it generated cash. Not a lot at first, but it was reliable, predictable. And that cash flow did something psychological. It removed fear. Sam knew that no matter what happened, the store would produce. He wasn't gambling. He was operating a system. Cash flow is the wealthy person's secret weapon. It's not sexy, it doesn't make for good cocktail party stories, but it's what allows you to be patient, to turn down bad deals, to wait for great opportunities instead of settling for good ones. Cash flow buys time, and time is how compound interest becomes generational wealth. The fifth principle, and this is the one nobody talks about: the first million requires you to become invisible. Sam lived like he was broke for 15 years after making serious money, not because he was cheap, but because he understood that lifestyle inflation is a trap. Every dollar you spend upgrading your life is a dollar that has to be earned again forever. Your new baseline becomes your new prison. The rich people stay invisible. They drive old cars, live in modest houses, wear regular clothes, not because they can't afford better, but because they've made a calculation. They'd rather be rich than look rich. And the gap between those two things is where most wealth gets destroyed. If you're starting to see the invisible rules that govern real wealth, subscribe now. This is the education nobody else is giving you. Here's what nobody wants to hear. The reason most people never build serious wealth isn't because they don't make enough money. It's because they can't tolerate being rich while still living like they're broke. They need the validation, the proof, the visible markers of success. And that need, that hunger for external confirmation, costs them everything. Because wealth is built in private, in silence, in the gap between what you have and what you show. And most people can't stand that gap. Rich people don't gamble with their first million because they know it's not about the money. It's about what the money can become if you just leave it alone. Be honest. If you made your first million tomorrow, what would you really do with it? Comment below.